I need an ambulance.
What's the address?
I need help, please.
What's going on there?
My husband just got shot.
To see an Evansville firefighter gunned down in front of his own home is something that we weren't really prepared for.
Now I hear a bunch of popping. I don't even know how many. I did not see.
Is this your husband?
Yes.
About 5 shots.
Yeah, his name is Robbie Door. He's a firefighter.
Robbie.
Connect electrodes.
Robbie.
A loving husband, a dedicated firefighter, a man with no known enemies, gunned down in cold blood just feet from his front door. No sign of robbery. No witnesses. Just silence. But in less than 12 hours, his wife was already at the fire department, asking about his pension. This is the story of Robbie Door, a respected firefighter from Evansville, Indiana. A man whose life was defined by service, until it was ended by a single, ruthless act of violence.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. That was my best friend, and now he's never gonna meet his grandson.
But what at first looked like a senseless killing soon revealed itself to be something far more sinister, a calculated plot, carried out by someone dangerously close. What investigators uncovered would shake an entire community, a web of deleted phone calls, a stolen murder weapon, and a convicted killer with ties to Robbie's own family. At the heart of it all was Elizabeth Becky Door, Robbie's wife, and her disturbing connection to a man named Larry Richmond Sr., an ex-con with a violent past. This wasn't just a murder. It was an execution, carefully orchestrated down to the minute, with a motive rooted in greed, and a trail of clues that would take nearly 2 years to fully unravel. Stay with us as we peel back the layers of a case that stunned us.
Popping. I don't even know how many. I did not see.
Is this your husband?
Yeah, his name is Robbie Door. He's a firefighter.
City, a tale of betrayal, deception, and the fatal price of putting trust in the wrong person. April 22, 2022, Evansville, Indiana. Just after 7 p.m., a quiet residential street is rocked by the sound of gunfire. Robbie Door had just returned home from work. As a seasoned firefighter, this was routine: park the car, step out, walk to the front door. But that evening, he never made it inside. Neighbors heard the shots. Some ran to their windows. Others called 911. What they found was horrifying. Robbie was lying in his driveway, shot multiple times from behind. There were no signs of a struggle. No forced entry. His wallet was untouched. Nothing was stolen from the home or his vehicle. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong, police would later say. This was an execution. Robbie had been ambushed. Someone had been lying in wait, watching and waiting for the exact moment to strike. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood immediately. They knocked on doors, asked questions, and looked for security footage. But no one had seen anything unusual, no suspicious vehicles, no unfamiliar faces. Whoever did this had planned it well and vanished without a trace. The only clues were shell casings at the scene, and the eerie quiet that followed. Then, in a tense moment captured on police body cam, officers approached a distraught family member. Studio microphone officer. Is he alive? Studio microphone family member, crying. No, he's not. Oh my God. As detectives tried to make sense of the crime scene,
Yes. Stay on the line. I'll connect you to the ambulance service, okay?
I got him on the phone. Rob. I don't know. I just heard a bunch of popping. Please get somebody here. Rob. Oh my God.
Ma'am, I need you to listen to me, okay, ma'am? Listen. Tell me what happened.
I don't know. I saw his truck pull in. I saw his headlights.
Okay, what kind of vehicle was it?
Ma'am, all I saw was my husband's headlights pull into the driveway, and then I heard a bunch of popping. My husband's 51 years old. His name is... Oh my God. Please hurry.
Her statement immediately raised suspicions, as the kitchen window directly overlooked the driveway.
but not the kind you'd expect from a grieving spouse. She wanted to know about Robbie's pension, said one firefighter. And his death benefits. According to city records, Becky was entitled to 75% of Robbie's pension for life, plus a $112,000 lump sum payout. The department staff was stunned. No funeral arrangements had been made. Robbie's friends were still in shock. And yet here was his wife, talking dollars and cents.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. That was my best friend, and now he's never gonna meet his grandson.
It wasn't just callous, it was suspicious. And for detectives, this would be the first red flag in what would soon become a case full of them. When someone is murdered, police look at the victim's inner circle first. Family, friends, finances, grudges. But what they found on Becky Door's phone raised immediate alarms, and opened the door to a darker truth. As investigators turned their attention to Becky, they subpoenaed her phone records. What they discovered shocked them. At 6:51 p.m., just minutes before Robbie was shot, Becky received a phone call. It lasted exactly 4 minutes and 18 seconds. The caller? A man named Larry Richmond Sr. Age, 46. Criminal record, disturbing. Larry Richmond Sr. was a convicted murderer, having served 45 years in prison for the 1996 killing of a 70-year-old man named James Everett Montgomery. He had only been released in 2021, less than a year before Robbie's death. Even more disturbingly, Larry wasn't a stranger. He was engaged to Becky's sister, Amanda. That made him family, and a man with deadly potential. But it wasn't just that one call. Detectives discovered that Becky had been in regular contact with Larry for months leading up to the murder. At least 15 phone calls had been made between them, and deleted. Becky had gone out of her way to erase those conversations. Why? What was she hiding? If there was nothing to cover up, why delete the calls? During questioning, Larry didn't deny knowing Robbie.
It's not just
In
you down
fact,
here.
he claimed they'd gone out drinking
Obviously, we're
together a
looking
few
into
times.
the Robbie Door
We go out.
situation. He was
We
gunned down
drink.
in his driveway.
Outside of that, I don't know
Well,
nothing.
it has to
I
do
didn't
with
do nothing,
everybody in the family. We
But
just trying to get
investigators
everybody in
weren't
here
buying it.
to see if there's just
Especially after
anything
they discovered a
that can
crucial
help us
piece
with
of
this
the puzzle, the
investigation.
murder weapon.
Do you wish to talk to me without a lawyer present?
The revolver used to kill Robbie had been reported stolen from a local pawn shop 6 months earlier, a powerful Taurus judge, capable of firing both .45 caliber rounds and shotgun shells. That pawn shop, River City Pawn, had a very familiar name on its employee list at the time of the theft, Larry Richmond Jr., the son of Larry Richmond Sr. When confronted, Larry Jr. confessed. He admitted to stealing the gun and handing it off to his father, just 2 days before Robbie's murder. It was all coming together, one detective recalled. The weapon, the phone calls, the deleted records, it wasn't random. It was a plan. A plan that now seemed to involve not just a cold-blooded ex-convict, but also Robbie's own wife. The noose was tightening, and Becky's role was becoming harder to ignore. Sometimes, the most damning evidence doesn't come from a lab or a surveillance feed. Sometimes, it's scribbled in ink, raw, personal, and unfiltered. At Robbie's funeral, emotions were high. Friends, colleagues, and family gathered to mourn a man they loved. A decorated firefighter. A loyal friend. A son. A husband. And it was at that funeral, among the flowers, prayers, and tears, that someone found something strange. A handwritten note. Signed simply, Larry. It read, "We need to talk. 81258952238, Larry." Who brings a note like that to a funeral? Investigators quickly seized it as evidence. The handwriting matched Larry Richmond Sr.'s. The note proved that he and Becky were still communicating, even after Robbie's murder. This wasn't over. This wasn't regret. This was ongoing contact. As detectives dug deeper, a disturbing narrative began to form. One that painted Becky Door as something far more sinister than a grieving widow. A letter written by Robbie before his death added fuel to the fire. In it, he accused Becky of being unfaithful. Though there was no proof of a romantic relationship between her and Larry, the implication lingered, and so did suspicion. Then came the most powerful testimony yet, from someone who knew Becky better than anyone. Her own son, Nathaniel. Nathaniel testified that in the weeks leading up to Robbie's murder, his mother had become obsessed with Robbie's pension. It was a conversation we had almost every day. I told her, "Mom, there are procedures. There's a process." But she just kept bringing it up. Nathaniel told the jury that Becky talked constantly about money, not grief, not healing, not her husband's memory. Just the benefits. Detectives had already verified that Becky stood to receive 75% of Robbie's pension, for life, and a $112,000 lump sum death benefit. And she wasn't waiting. She went to inquire about that money less than 12 hours after Robbie's death. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was motive. The combination of deleted calls, the link to a convicted murderer, the stolen weapon, the funeral note, and the financial obsession, it all added up to something cold and calculated. But the evidence didn't stop there. Cell phone location data placed Larry Richmond Sr. near Robbie's home before and after the murder. His phone was powered off at 6:52 p.m., just after his 4-minute call with Becky, and turned back on at 7:14 p.m., right after Robbie was gunned down. It was as if Larry had deliberately gone dark, vanishing off the grid while the crime occurred. The timing wasn't a coincidence. It was a cover. All signs pointed to one conclusion: Becky Door and Larry Richmond Sr. had conspired to kill Robbie Door. For money, possibly for love, but certainly with cold intent. The state had its case. Now, it was time for a jury to hear the full story. It was the spring of 2024 when the courtroom doors opened and the people of Evansville filled the benches. This was justice, years in the making. Elizabeth Becky Door stood trial for the murder of her husband, Robbie Door, a man beloved by his community, brutally executed in his own driveway.
There will be no evidence that Becky Door had any conversation with anyone about killing anyone. That doesn't exist. That is a speculative, suppositional, grandiose suggestion to support a charge that should have never been filed. You will hear no evidence of Becky Door talking about getting a gun. You'll hear no evidence about a conversation with anyone that's plotting her husband's death. That evidence does not exist.
Her lawyers pointed out that there were no recorded conversations discussing a murder plot, no texts, no written orders, just circumstantial evidence.
Strong about the case, but I have doubts. I mean, I can't be on the phone conversation with him that night. The deleted phone.
You have. Let's sort of get this out in the open.
Yeah, absolutely.
There was a phone conversation that you asked Becky about at some point, correct?
Correct.
And you allege it's with Larry Richmond Sr., right?
It is, yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
You have no idea what they talked about, do you?
No.
And you know who initiated that call, don't you?
He did.
Who?
Larry Richmond Sr.
He did. In fact, in your investigation, you don't have any evidence that Becky Door ever initiated a phone conversation of any kind with Larry Richmond Sr., correct?
Correct.
In fact, this idea that is floated that these two were lovers, you don't have any communication between the two of them that would suggest that, do you?
Correct.
So if there's been a representation that there's going to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt that Becky Door and Larry Richmond Sr. were lovers, that evidence doesn't exist, does it?
Correct. But that's where, may I speak? Yes. May I speak, sir? Okay, thank you. When we talked about doubt, that's what, because we can't get content from a phone conversation. That's why I have to take her. Now, looking at everything that has come in, I don't believe her answer. That's where I feel strong about the case, but my doubt is I can't listen to the phone conversation. People can delete text messages between the two.
Right.
And we can't prove but they can discard them before we collect the phone. That happens all the time.
Her contact with Larry could be explained by family ties. After all, he was engaged to her sister, Amanda. There's no proof she knew what Larry was planning. You can't convict a woman on suspicion alone. But the prosecution reminded the jury, this wasn't just suspicion. This was deleted phone records, secret communications, a sudden interest in death benefits, a note at a funeral, and a stolen gun in the hands of a man who had already killed once before. You don't need to be the one pulling the trigger to be guilty of murder. The jury listened. The evidence was overwhelming. But one question still loomed large. What was the final straw? What finally convinced Becky Door to end her husband's life? When the trial ended, the courtroom fell silent. Years of grief, speculation, and painful truths now rested in the hands of 12 strangers, the jury. They had heard the evidence, the deleted phone calls, the stolen weapon, the suspicious timing of Becky's inquiry about the pension. They had listened to Becky's own son testify against her, painting her not as a grieving widow, but as a cold and calculating conspirator. It didn't take long. We, the jury, find the defendant guilty. The words landed like thunder. Elizabeth Becky Door was found guilty of conspiracy to commit murder, and guilty of facilitating the murder of her husband, Robbie Door. As the verdict was read, Becky showed no visible emotion. No tears. No breakdown. Just silence. But across the aisle, Robbie's family broke down. His fellow firefighters gripped each other's shoulders. After nearly 3 years, justice had finally arrived. For a community that had lost one of its own, the wound would never fully heal. But the truth, at least, was finally revealed. At sentencing, the prosecution didn't hold back. Robbie Door dedicated his life to saving others. He should have been safe in his own driveway. Instead, his wife, the one person who should have protected him, betrayed him for money. The judge handed down a sentence that matched the crime. Becky Door will spend the rest of her life behind bars for orchestrating her husband's murder. But she wasn't alone. Shortly after, Larry Richmond Sr. was also tried and convicted for his role in the crime. The man with a prior murder conviction now faced his second life sentence, this time for being a hitman in a suburban conspiracy fueled by money, secrets, and betrayal. 2 lives gone. 1 to death. 1 to prison. And in the middle of it all, a legacy of pain that stretched across families, generations, and an entire community. After the trial, Robbie's brother spoke to the press. Robbie was the kind of guy who would run into a burning building to save a stranger. He deserved so much more than this. We'll never stop missing him, but at least now, we know the truth. The Evansville Fire Department held a memorial in Robbie's honor. His fellow firefighters remembered him as a loyal friend, a dedicated professional, and a man who deserved love, not betrayal. He was taken in the most cowardly of ways, ambushed in his driveway, just feet from the home he shared with his wife. But what his killers couldn't take was the legacy he left behind. Robbie Door's story is a chilling reminder. Sometimes, the greatest danger doesn't come from strangers, it comes from the people closest to us. This was a man who spent his life protecting others, only to be betrayed by the one person he trusted most. Justice came slowly, but it came. And with it, the truth rose to the surface. Rest in peace, Robbie Door. You will never be forgotten.